Hey folks, I've got to respond to a lot of comments I've gotten over the months, probably even years. A lot of folks will write in all sincerity, insist that they have the best rifle cartridge. And it's often the 308 Winchester or the 30-06. And none of you will be surprised if I say, no, the 308 Winchester is not the best cartridge. But some of you might be surprised if I say, neither is the 30-06. And I'm going to explain why on this episode of Ron Spomer Outdoors. Okay, so why do I think neither of these is the best cartridge? I've touched on this before in some videos, and the simple truth is there's no way to define the best cartridge. How do you do that? The best cartridge for one person may not be the best for the next person. And I think you can understand this from several perspectives. First of all, let's take recoil. Some people absolutely hate recoil, and they think the 308 recoils too much, let alone the 30-06, let alone the 300 Win Mag. So from that perspective, these are not the best. They might say, the 30-30 is much better. It's the same weight bullets roughly. It's a 308, the same, but it shoots a lot more slowly, so it doesn't have as much recoil. They prefer it. Then somebody else will say, are you kidding? The 30-30 can't be the best because it doesn't really even reach to 300 yards. It drops way too much. I need to reach out where I hunt. Man, I need to stretch out there. Give me the 30-378 Weatherby. Obviously, they're not worried about recoil, but my goodness, if you want to reach out and touch someone, it's going to do a much better job than the 30-30 or the 308 or the 30-06. So for that particular individual and his needs or her needs, the 30-378 might be the best cartridge. Okay, now from another perspective, I think what a lot of folks mean when they say the best is best all around. And I've done this several times too. What do you mean by the best all around cartridge? Well, it would be one that I think fulfills the needs of a, say, big game hunter. And by big game, I don't necessarily mean dangerous game. I mean deer and elk and sheep and goats and the things that we hunt and love to eat. So if you're going to buy just one rifle, just one cartridge that is going to be able to handle your whitetail, your small whitetails like the cow's deer, a lot of people pronounce it, that little one down in the desert mountains. In pronghorn, they're only 100, 110 pounds, pretty small. And if you go to Africa, you get some really small animals down to the size of a 10-pound dick. Wow. But then you also go to an elk, which is kind of the big animal for North American hunters when you dream of taking that big adventuresome hunt. You're looking at an elk, and that's, 600, 700, 800, even up to 1,000 pounds. That's a big animal. And then there are moose, and they can go up to like 1,300. They even report on some 1,400 pounders. And of course, the big bears, a brown bear, they're pushing 1,500 pounds sometimes, maybe even a little more. I don't know. But you get the drift. Bigger animals. So what one cartridge is going to handle all that? That, I think, is one of the reasons so many people say 30-06, because it's been used for all of that for so many years and proven itself. And it's not because it reaches as far as the 30-378 necessarily, or delivers as much energy downrange as that, but it does well enough. It's not overpowered for the little pronghorn with a 150 grain bullet or even 130 or 125. That flattens your trajectory and reduces your recoil. So it can work just fine for that. But then if you need to step up to the elk, 180 grain, 200 grain. Moose, same thing. Even get up to a 220 grain round nose. It should stabilize that in most of your 30-06s. So then when guys say, well, the 308 will do anything the 30-06 will do. Not when you start putting 200 grain bullets and heavier on it. It sort of peters out after 180 grains. It just doesn't have the horsepower, the powder capacity to do that kind of work. So a lot of guys, in me included, will say that's why it is not best. But if you're not concerned about shooting 1,000-pound animals or reaching really far to do it, the 308 can be the best for you because you're going to spend most of your hunting career tackling deer whitetails and mule deer, and maybe you'll go out for an elk somewhere, and that 308 will handle that. I've seen it being done. So you can then carry a lighter rifle, and that's something else to consider. One of the reasons so many people like the 30-30 is because it comes in that convenient and fun to operate lever action rifle. Now, who can argue against that? If that gives you joy, if you just love to carry that, and it works for your brand of hunting, and most eastern woodland hunting for whitetails, you're looking at a 50-yard shot to maybe 150 on the outside. And if you really work with that 30-30 and get really good with it, you can do 200 and even 250 yards. If you can line up the sights. I'm not going to try a 250-yard shot with a 30-30, but there are folks who can do it. And for them, the 30-30 might be best. And then, of course, we're always talking 30s and 30 calibers here, but you don't have to go with the 30. There's nothing wrong with the 7s or the 6.5s or, gosh, even some of the 24s. I don't recommend you buy a 243 Winchester and take it moose hunting every year or elk hunting every year, but plenty of moose and elk have been taken with the 243 or anyone close to that one. Hey guys, you might notice these little walnut items on my table quite often. I've covered those before, but it's a little thing, but I think it's pretty cool. There's a gentleman retired who loves woodworking, and he finds scrap walnut and a few other woods, and he makes cartridge boxes. And this is his latest one. He sent me this one. Said, hey, Ron, what do you think of this one? Do you like the brass nameplate on there or not? And look how it's set up. You can cover, 2, 4, 6, 8 cartridges in a pretty slim little box that should fit in your pocket. Would you use that in the field as a hunting buck? Well, if I were doing what I call a quality hunt with a fancy rifle in good weather, when you want to take out that safe queen and actually use it, boy, you complement a beautifully stocked walnut traditional rifle with an ammo box like this, and you are right uptown. And John makes a whole bunch of different sizes. I mean, look at this one for some short pistol rounds or on the bench. A lot of guys like to have a big box with 50, 60, 80, even 100 rounds for the bench work. You show up at your shooting club with a box of ammo like this, and your friends are going to sit up and take notice. And I think they make a great gift for the man or woman who has everything. So if there's a shooter in your future, what do we have? Mother's Day coming up, Father's Day coming up. This would be something really different. Get your orders in though, because this is just a one-man shop, really small. He tries to accommodate folks, and he can customize this stuff. So if you're looking for something really different, check it out. I will give you an address. We'll put a link on here so you can find it, but I'll just spit it out. He calls it openrangecreations.com. His name is John, and he's a great guy. So just go to www.openrangecreations.com. We'll put the link here, but just tell him what you're looking for, visit with him, and you might end up with a one-of-a-kind ammo box to be proud of. But something else we need to consider. What if you live in Ohio and you can't shoot a 30-06 or even a 308 at deer? Then you're starting to look at something like the 350 Legend, because it has to be a straight-walled cartridge in that state. And there are some other states that require straight-wall cartridges. So someone's going to say, well, the 350 Legend is the best cartridge. Because for them, where they live and hunt, it probably is. But then some others who are looking at a straight wall will say, well, are you crazy? That puny little thing? If you're going straight wall, 45-70, a lot more horsepower, bigger punch, heavier bullets, that's much more dependable. That is the best. But wait a minute. That one is not legal in all states that do mandate straight cartridges because it's too long. They also put a limit on the length. That's why the 350 Legend was developed, to fit that particular niche. So there you go. Now, other folks will say, listen, this is what I consider the best. An 8.6 blackout. This one was new to me just a few months ago, but that is hot property for guys who are mostly hunting feral hogs and they want to shoot suppressed. The whole idea with suppressed is to launch your bullet at less than supersonic speeds, which is around 1,100 feet per second at sea level. If you're going slower than that, you're not getting the sonic crack. That bullet is not going to have a sonic boom down range. And then if you put a suppressor on the end of your barrel, you're not hearing a very loud report either. So it makes it more difficult for those bunches of hogs, sounder of pigs, to detect where the shot's coming from, and you can get more shots in. It also reduces your recoil, so you can get more shots in a field before they run off. And that's an important consideration. So folks who are hunting at fairly close ranges and need that will say something like this 8.6 Blackout is the best cartridge. Then we get to, and I didn't bring it up here, I surely should have, but of course, we're going to go with the 375 H&H Magnum. That is the best. And that was hard to argue with because of its efficacy for everything. That one's big enough to be legal for taking Cape buffalo, big dangerous game like that in Africa. For someone who's thinking they're going to be doing that kind of hunting, get a 375 H&H and you're definitely covered for anything in North America. You can always shoot smaller stuff with a bigger cartridge, but you can't necessarily shoot the big stuff with a smaller cartridge. So there's a good way to look at it. So you see where I'm coming from here, and you see where I'm going about this best. It's starting to bug me just a little bit when guys insist that, by golly, this is the best. I understand. I tend to do that myself. When you get a cartridge that you love and a rifle that you love and you do really well with it, you start to assume that it is the best because it's been the best for you for a long time. And I can't argue with that. That's just a really good way to look at it. But don't insist that everyone else has to agree with you, because based on what their needs are, what they're hunting, where they're hunting, what the regulations and the laws are, it really changes what is best. The cool thing, and I think this is the takeaway, regardless where you hunt and how and all the rest of it, the cool thing is that each of us gets to decide what is best. We don't live in a totalitarian state where the government says you can use this one, you can't use that one, you can only use this one, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the beauty of the United States of America. I'm sorry, folks, I say this quite often, but it's true. We are so fortunate to live in this country and have the freedoms that we have. And I am so glad that our founding fathers had the wisdom to pull together our Declaration of Independence, followed up by the Bill of Rights in our Constitution, that gives us these protected rights, the inherent unalienable rights that we have. I think it's hugely important. Even in a relatively simple thing like, I get to pick my favorite best cartridge. It really does make a difference. It does to me. I'm sure it does to you. So let's celebrate that and allow ourselves to pick our own best rifles and cartridges, and then go ahead and dive into the weeds on it and study the ballistics and figure out what is exactly that cartridge you think is the best really doing for you. And you've got to admit, it's got some shortcomings, but then it has some strengths. So find it out. Heck, I would recommend you draw up a list of the pros and cons. My cartridge is the best because of, and then put down all the things you love. But then open your mind a little bit and say, yeah, it really doesn't shoot all that far, or gosh, it sure recoils a lot, or sure requires a heavy rifle or a long barrel that I don't necessarily love, but I'm willing to put up with that because I like the other stuff. That's the way to give a good judgment call on the best cartridge. So this is Ron Spomer wishing you all the best hunting, all the best joy of field. Hunt safely, shoot safely, and enjoy your best cartridge.